Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Wax Lyrical, the advertising podcast. Coming to you today from the 40th floor of the Gherkin in central London. This is amazing. It's audio, so you kind of have to imagine I'm sitting in this really cool place and I'm watching planes flying overhead and it's 25 degrees outside and I wish I'd put suntan lotion on. Anyway, today we're talking about subscriptions with my mate Paul and very clever people, Fiona, who is the global CMO of the FT, and Tom, who's a fellow podcaster and runs a really cool agency that's all about automated creative. But let's dive straight into the whole podcast debate. And we've heard, this is part of an event, and we've heard this morning that the sector is exploding. In fact, one of the things that I read is that 100% growth in just 5 years in this category. And it continues to grow with fascinating new entrants. Tom, why do you think, because you're kind of my geeky investor guy, he turned up with his skateboard, obviously. Why do you think that investors are so turned on to this whole sector?
The short answer to that is data. So from a consumer perspective, a subscription, certainly from a receiving a box perspective, is quite a delight. It's either a convenient way to get the things that you want, or it gives you access to a level of curation that you wasn't available before, or maybe there's a cost saving there. But the really interesting thing from an investor perspective is that every time a consumer receives a package or pays for a subscription, that business is collecting data about that person, and that's data around the preferences that are related specifically to that product. So actually, it's giving a unique data insight into the sector that subscription represents. So, for example, HelloFresh, they have an algorithmic approach to the recipes that they create. So based on the kind of things that people like or rate or send back or whatever it is, they know what kind of ingredients, what kind of cultures, what kind of recipes are exciting to that audience. But that's at a massive scale. I mean, I don't know the numbers of that business, but certainly huge in the US and changing that in the UK. So they're starting to do a research project into the tastes and interests in food across the US and UK. And that is data that no one else has. So that is why it's super interesting.
Do you reckon that we're just beginning to tap into the data that we've got available? Well, what about the FT? Are you using all the data that you've got, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just passed our millionth subscriber.
Million? Wow.
Yeah, and ahead of target. So I think that kind of reflects for us that the subscriptions aren't really going anywhere, and the amount of data we have on our customers is obviously quite extensive. And I think the more important thing is using it properly and being transparent with our customers on what we use that for, and giving that back to them. So a couple of things we do, all of our customers have their own individual RFV scores, so we know that if they're becoming disengaged, then we will send them more relevant content to remind them of the value of their subscription and get them back to being engaged. We also try and put their own data back into their hands and show them, this is what you've been reading, this is the articles you've been reading, this is how often you come to us, so that they know what we know about them. So there's no secrets. We're not using their data in the wrong way. We're saying we're being transparent with them, and that's on their purchasing and on their user behaviour. So they've got that trust in us that they expect from a premium brand.
I think the beauty of the data as well is it's sort of taken us back to some real traditional direct marketing techniques. Those that have grown up in data-driven marketing, the beauty and the depth of the data that companies have now got. You're seeing much more traditional ways of working, which is great. Personalisation, real direct response, because you know what they're watching or know what they're consuming. So the data and the power, and we've talked about personalisation already, but that's a real power, and it's actually quite exciting to see some more traditional techniques being used by the more modern brands. Another thing for me, I suppose, I'm not an investor yet, but
you might be one day.
I might be one day. There we go. But
when our business finally takes off.
Definitely not at the moment. But
we're part of a startup, in case you hadn't guessed. But go on.
I think a big part of it is this lifetime value model, which we've already touched upon on a few of these bits. Traditional business, some businesses that are very focused on the sort of the kind of inconsistent retail cycles that can be unknown, difficult to forecast against. As an investor, it'd be very, very attractive to have all these kind of fixed lifetime value cycles, whether it's monthly or annual, that you can really plan for, you can invest against with a lot more confidence than you would from probably more of a retail cycle.
Can I tell my Netflix story? Is it okay? Fiona's heard this, sorry. So I was privileged a while ago to have a chat with the woman who was, which is why I think she's now talking about it, was the head of data at Netflix. And I don't know whether you remember, there was a bit of a thing about Reed Hastings, the main guy at Netflix, saying that they weren't going to use the data to influence any kind of creative decisions that they would take at Netflix. Because there was a bit of an outcry. Spoiler alert for those of you who have not seen House of Cards. But anyway, there was an outcry at the opening of the first scene of the first episode of House of Cards when Kevin goes out and strangles the dog. Sorry, I've done it now. You're never going to watch it. Because apparently loads of people kind of stopped there and turned off and didn't want to watch any further, and they have all that kind of data. And Reed had said, no, we are never going to let the talent, as in the creative people, the writers and the producers, see the data because he thinks it would affect them. Well, this woman who was head of data at Netflix, she said to me, yeah, maybe not actually, because I shouldn't tell you this, but when Kevin and the executive producer were casting House of Cards, guess who they went to help them work out who should play the lead female role? They came to me, and I went through all the data, because it was still quite early on streaming, but they had DVD kind of rental data. It was still quite early on, and she said, all I can say is I gave them a list of female actresses, and Robin Wright was at the top of that list. So data, cast, Robin Wright. And later, amazingly, she used that data to get a pay rise, because she told them that she was one of the most important characters in the show, and also she then became an executive producer too. So that is the power of data in a subscriptions model.
Can I add to that slightly? Another really interesting story about Netflix is the way that they use artificial intelligence to control the tiles that you see. You know, when you're scrolling through Netflix thinking, why is there nothing good to watch? Every time you see one of those tiles, give or take, it'll be a bit different, whether it's a different actor or it's an action shot or whatever. Each of those tiles changes depending on the type of tiles for other shows that you've clicked on. So if you've clicked on a male face or a female face or a male and female together, then that will change the way that those tiles are served up to you. So I think it's debatable how much they use the data in writing the scripts. I've heard a few stories, but they're very open about the way that they use machine learning to coerce you to watch Netflix shows. So every time you think you're pressing a button through your own volition, in fact, there's some Californian user experience dude making you do it.
But you don't mind that, do you?
I have a bit of a bugbear about Netflix because I think that their model is that I don't think they care about making brilliant TV. I think they care about you not unsubscribing. They don't need to make amazing TV. They need to make you not unsubscribe. Whereas I think that that's a real shift away, like from business like the BBC, for example, that prides itself in brilliance. A publication like the FT, like you have a pride in what you do. You have a journalistic bar that you need to get to. Netflix just want to satisfy their investors.
You don't think they care about content?
Okay, of course there's people at Netflix who are incredibly passionate about content, and there's some incredibly passionate people there, but they are a tech business that design algorithms so that we keep on watching Netflix. They say that their main competitor is sleep.
Well, yeah, we heard that this morning, yeah. Well, okay, I'm a big fan. I think you are, aren't you too, Fiona, of Netflix?
Yeah.
Because you were saying you don't mind I can't remember how much I pay.
Yeah.
Is it $7.99 a month we pay for Netflix?
Yeah.
Well, all right, I'm going to challenge you on that. Sorry, I've had a coffee. So, when you're scrolling through Netflix and you're like, seen that, boring. It's like going through the Argos catalogue ages ago. Versus flicking through your podcast feed, which is incredible. You're like, oh my God, I want to hear that. That sounds amazing. Podcasts create this incredible FOMO. You really feel you're missing out. Whereas Netflix is there's only they only need to make enough shows for me not to unsubscribe.
I don't know whether this is what you mean, but in the old days, I used to show my mates my Amazon recommendations because it was kind of like me. Do you know what I mean? This defines me. Barbara Streisand was the kind of top of my Amazon recommendations all the time. Gay man, in case you hadn't guessed. And now I show mates my podcast iTunes thing. Because that defines me.
That's curation though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're wildly off piece already, but that's curation. Like Netflix is curating it for you versus your podcast feed, I imagine, would be, you've chosen that, so it'd be a much truer representation of who you are and what you want to listen to. Whereas Netflix are, as you said, they're doing either their best guess to make sure you're loyal, or they're trying to promote what they think will keep you there. But I'm not as cynical as you, I don't think.
Hey, look, one thing that we were going to get to, did you want to talk about the fact that you get annoyed with me? I'm wearing my favourite subscription product, which is not a plug, I'm not paid. It's the London Sock Company. In case you hadn't guessed, every month I get a new pair of socks. Here's today's pair. If somebody wants to take a photo, then I might get some free socks. Can you do that? Thank you. Have you got me socks? Yes? Okay, thank you. Got the logo. Did you want to talk about me being environmentally unfriendly?
There's a question mark around sustainability, I think. I challenge Mark to say, like, would you normally be getting socks that often? Would you normally be getting socks? Would you need it delivered that often? So there's the carbon footprint of delivery and packaging and all that sort of stuff. And he says he would be buying socks monthly, which I don't. But
Well, no, I'd buy a really big pack from Primark, wouldn't I, instead? But I do this.
yeah, but there's a huge topic around sustainability, which is look at Deliveroo, look at Prime delivery. This unlimited delivery you now get is now a real sustainable question mark, right? Which is a lot more trucks on the road, a lot more deliveries, a lot more returns. I think the latest stat in the retail industry is a third of products get returned, which I think is crazy, but that's what fast fashion has created. So I think we always need to have our sustainability hat on, which is around the circular economy, which Rick, the trainers you had on screen, is very much around that. The circular economy, which is moving away from what we currently live in, which is linear, which is like we take resources, we make something that gets bought, and then we effectively just waste it. So circular economy is about designing products that can be repurposed. So the trainers is a perfect example that you can get into a model where you actually buy trainers that are sustainable when you're finished with them, or they're just duff. You send them back and you get new trainers. You know, so it's moving towards behaving like the natural environment. So that's what I'm very passionate about. I'm not seeing enough of it yet, and that's why I challenge Mark on his sock choices.
But that's why I think things like Rent the Runway are really
Yes,
interesting,
yeah, of course,
because
yeah.
instead of buying expensive outfits for certain occasions, now people are looking to rent them because they don't want to waste things. And I think that's where the future of subscriptions might be going, is with that a more ethical view in mind, and how can we make the world a better place by the things we're doing and be conscious of it.
Which I think is higher on the agenda for the future generation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, seeing as we're talking about how big the subscriptions thing has got, one of my hobby horses is I think the bubble is bursting, and I think that we might have reached peak subscription. What do you reckon, guys?
Well, I would challenge anyone to think of anything that you can't subscribe to eventually. So I would obviously disagree with that. But my first job was selling subscriptions, so I think we've been doing it for 20 years. I can't see it going away anytime soon. But I think actually what's interesting is the expansion of subscriptions. So take things like Graze or Bloom and Wild that start as a subscription service and then move into retail.
Yeah.
I don't think that's anything bursting. I think that's them seeing an opportunity, creating a really brilliant product and solving a customer need, and that being able to be expanded into other spaces as well as subscriptions.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, to maybe back up your point, it's definitely got to peak weird, that's for sure. I came across Cannabox, which is a subscription of smoking paraphernalia.
Oh, I thought it was going to be cannibalism.
It's a new one.
You said weird. I thought
Moving on.
Then there's a Guitar Affair. So anyone who plays guitar, you can just get a subscription for your kind of dream guitar. You have it for a month or two, and then you pass it on as a musician.
that
you
kind
can
of
say-
does work.
And Bacon of the Month. I was quite amused by
Bacon?
Bacon of the Month. You get sent a rare breed, streaky or back or whatever. So.
Bacon of
Nothing
the
you
month. That
can't
beats my
subscribe
socks,
to.
doesn't
There
it?
is nothing you can't subscribe to.
But so if we can subscribe to anything, I did a bit of research, believe it or not, and McKinsey tell us that one of the main reasons that we love subscriptions is the curation thing that we've talked about, and also the experience, curation, experience, personalization. So if it's growing into retail, my hypothesis is you lose all of that because you just go to Boots and get a Harry's, and I don't get all of that interesting stuff around it. So will retail kill off the subscription model as they get bought by Unilever and stuck into Boots?
I think it's a case of doing both. And my completely unsubstantiated hypothesis is that the subscriptions are not mass market enough yet. So those brands that are successful with subscriptions, they want to really grow. They need to move into bricks and mortar because that's where the mass is at the moment. Might be wrong, but that's my hypothesis. I think they will continue to do both. But in the short term, even the medium term, to make real growth, you do have to go into the bricks and mortar, which is what we're seeing, especially in the male grooming, like the shaving market.
One version of the future is the impact that Amazon will have on this. And in terms of our purchase and our purchase intent, Amazon has a data set kind of more accurate than Facebook, certainly, and potentially even Google, but also has the infrastructure. So at some point, if Amazon really decided to lean into doing subscription, it should be able to absolutely destroy everyone, because it would know exactly the kind of things you buy. It would have the data to be able to test packages on people like you, and it'll eventually get to something that has been around for a little while called anticipatory shipping. I'm sure they'll think of something more sexy than that. But that is essentially Amazon just sending you things it knows you want. So on a super simple level, it might be like, well, you've probably run out of toothpaste. On a slightly more complex level, it might be like, okay, you've started buying nappies, therefore you're going to need a teething ring at some point. But on a very creative level, it might actually be able to start to suggest things to you, like a completely new food group or a completely different type of fashion that you hadn't considered before. But because there's so many millions of data points from people like you, that they should be able to make a fairly confident bet. But also, they can take the risk on the shipping because of their infrastructure. So they'll send out a little land drone to you. You'll open the box and say...
A little what? Land drone?
A land drone.
Oh, like one of the... Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like not a flying one, but probably a driven one, autonomous thing. It'll open up and go, look, here's the toothbrush you need, here's the dummy, and look at this pair of jeans. We know you'll like them because people like you think they're cool.
And as long as I don't have to pay for it if I don't want it, I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's part of your Prime subscription.
Fantastic.
So Mark, we're pretty short on time. We usually waffle for about 90 minutes, but we're pretty short on time.
Oh, is somebody telling you I've got to wrap up?
I've had the nod,
Okay,
yeah.
so
should we finish with like a prediction for the future?
The future, yeah. Go on. Tom, you wanted to kind of give us your AI future, didn't you?
Yeah, I think that subscriptions will go two ways. We'll have like big players like Amazon, like I just mentioned, just dominating it using a very AI approach. But I think there will always be a place for the small, kind of more kitchen sink, really bespoke craft, handmade stuff that is far too small for the big players to get involved in.
Now, we're going to say TM this because Fiona's had a new business idea already, so you can't take it away from us. You tell us about what you think our future is.
Well, I think it's, the whole point of people subscribing to things is for convenience, and we've got very busy lifestyles and people want ease and they want that curation. But I think when we started with subscriptions, our competitors were other media owners, other content providers, and actually now our competitors is this entire subscriptions economy and everyone's budget for subscription services. And I think going back to being a marketer, what does that customer need do? I think we need to make it as easy as possible for them. So as people are subscribing to more and more things, how do they manage that journey? How do they manage their payments? How do they know what's going in and what's going out? Are they getting the best deal? Are they using the things that they're paying for? And I think especially for the older generations, as things become more complicated, an aggregated view of certain industries and what they're subscribing to, and helping people manage that, and going back to taking the hassle out of things for people rather than just throwing them more and more options and more confusion and more different payments. I think we need to address that, make it easy for them to cancel, to allow them to come back to you rather than trying to stop them from cancelling because you're scared they won't.
I'd use that.
You've found a kind of platform that's like that, haven't you, already?
It's more pre-purchase, sort of like a money supermarket type, to aggregate if I'm looking for child stuff or beauty stuff. But the post-purchase, once you have the subscriptions, then perfect.
So, any investors in the room, we had the idea, we're offering 5% for 100,000 quid for the platform, okay? Well, look, that's been great. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget you can subscribe to Wax Lyrical on all those usual platforms. But from the Gherkin, it's goodbye. Say goodbye, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.